After decades in emergency medicine, the most unexpected signal wasn't a diagnosis. It was a quiet, persistent fatigue. Not the kind that improves with rest, but something deeper. A subtle slowing, a reduced responsiveness that feels almost invisible at first, until it isn't. What became clear is this. The body doesn't simply run out of capacity with age. It changes how it responds. Systems that once repaired, adapted, and regenerated efficiently begin to lose their sensitivity. And when that happens, everything from energy to recovery to metabolism begins to shift. The question then becomes, can we influence those systems again in a meaningful, practical way? One of the most common misconceptions about aging is that the body simply runs out of its ability to repair. In reality, your body still holds an incredible reserve of regenerative potential. It just doesn't respond the same way it used to. And this subtle shift is what many people begin to feel as unexplained fatigue, slower movement, or reduced resilience. Stem cells don't disappear. They become less responsive. Even later in life, your body still contains millions of these powerful repair cells, quietly waiting in tissues like bone marrow and muscle. The difference is that over time, the signals that activate them become weaker and less frequent. It's not that the system is gone, it's that the communication has slowed down. With age, especially after 60, this decline in signaling becomes more noticeable. The body's internal communication network, what tells cells when to repair, rebuild, or regenerate, loses some of its efficiency. Think of it like a light dimmer rather than a switch. The system's still on, but it's no longer operating at full brightness. And that reduced intensity begins to affect how the body functions day to day. Muscle strength and stability also begin to decline, not necessarily because of inactivity, but because the body isn't repairing muscle tissue as efficiently. Small losses compound over time, leading to reduced balance, less coordination, and a gradual sense of physical limitation. It's not always dramatic, but it's consistent. At the same time, fat metabolism becomes more resistant. Areas that were once easy to manage, like around the waist or hips, start to hold on to fat more stubbornly. This isn't just about diet or exercise. It's often tied to how well the body is signaling its cells to burn or store energy. When responsiveness drops, fat-burning processes slow down as well. And this leads to a key insight that many people overlook. The issue isn't just aging itself, it's reduced biological responsiveness. The systems are still there, the cells are still capable, but the signals that drive them aren't as strong or as clear as they once were. But here's where it gets more interesting. If responsiveness is the real issue, then improving that responsiveness may help restore some of the function people assume is permanently lost. Not by forcing the body, but by gently supporting the signals it already understands. So instead of overhauling everything at once, it often makes sense to start with something simple and consistent. For many people, morning coffee is already part of the daily routine. It's predictable, easy to adjust, and, perhaps surprisingly, it can act as a reliable delivery system for compounds that interact with your biology. That's exactly why the focus turns to coffee. Because it's not about adding complexity, it's about upgrading something you're already doing. When a habit is consistent, even small improvements can compound over time. And this creates an opportunity to introduce supportive elements without disrupting your lifestyle. During experimentation, one thing became very clear. Most additions made little to no noticeable difference. Many popular health add-ins sounded promising, but in practice, they didn't translate into meaningful changes in how the body felt or performed. And this is where many people get stuck, trying too many things without clear results. But a select few stood out. Certain additions created subtle yet noticeable shifts, more stable energy, slightly faster recovery, and an overall sense that the body was responding better. Not dramatically, but consistently enough to pay attention. And over time, those small differences began to add up.
And this is the part most people overlook. The benefit wasn't coming from the coffee itself. It wasn't about caffeine or flavor or even stimulation. It was about what those specific additions were doing beneath the surface, interacting with biological pathways tied to regeneration, metabolism, and cellular signaling. In other words, the real value wasn't in the drink, it was in what the drink was helping to activate.
So starting with number 5, we have black seed oil, a simple addition that works quietly in the background but supports some very important systems. What makes it valuable is its key compound, thymoquinone, which is linked to cellular protection and internal balance. Rather than creating a strong, immediate effect, it helps the body stay more stable and responsive over time. It may also support immune function while helping regulate low-grade inflammation, one of the main factors that can interfere with recovery. When this internal stress is reduced, the body can shift more easily toward repair instead of constant defense.
There's also a subtle role in metabolic efficiency, particularly in how the body uses stored energy. It doesn't force fat loss, but it may help the body become more effective at using what's already there. From a practical standpoint, about half a teaspoon can be added to freshly brewed coffee. With consistent use, the effects tend to build gradually, setting the stage for the next layer of support.
Number 4, we have cardamom. It may seem like a simple spice, but what makes it stand out is its range of bioactive compounds that interact with how cells decide what to do. Instead of forcing a reaction, it appears to gently influence cellular behavior, especially in areas tied to metabolism. And this subtle guidance is where its real value begins to show. One of its key effects is supporting metabolic flexibility, which is the body's ability to switch between using energy and storing it. When this flexibility is strong, the body adapts more easily to changes in food intake or activity levels. But when it declines, energy tends to get stored rather than used. Cardamom may help nudge this balance back toward more efficient energy use. It may also play a role in guiding cells away from fat storage pathways. This doesn't mean it blocks fat entirely, but rather that it supports a healthier distribution of energy. Over time, this can influence how and where the body holds on to excess energy, especially in areas that tend to become more resistant with age. Another important aspect is its potential effect on insulin sensitivity. When cells respond better to insulin, glucose is used more effectively, rather than being stored unnecessarily. This creates a more stable internal environment, where energy levels feel steadier instead of fluctuating throughout the day. And this is where the deeper insight comes in. Metabolism isn't just about calories, it's about communication at the cellular level. When signals are clear and responsive, the body naturally manages energy more efficiently. But when that signaling becomes disrupted, even small imbalances can build over time. From a practical standpoint, adding cardamom is simple. About a quarter teaspoon of freshly ground cardamom can be mixed into coffee, or you can brew your coffee with whole pods for a milder infusion. Freshness matters here because the active compounds are more potent when the spice is recently ground. It's a small addition, but one that works quietly in the background, supporting how the body uses and directs energy. And the next one builds on this in a slightly different way.
Astragalus root works at a deeper level than most additions, which is why it's often associated with long-term cellular support rather than quick, noticeable changes. One of the key mechanisms linked to it involves telomeres, protective structures at the ends of your DNA that play a role in how cells age and replicate. When these structures are better maintained, cells tend to function more efficiently over time. What this influences is not just how long cells live,
but how well they perform during that time. A more stable cellular lifespan supports consistent tissue repair and renewal, which becomes increasingly important as the body's natural turnover slows down. It's less about pushing the body harder and more about preserving the quality of what's already there. It also has a connection to immune system resilience. Rather than overstimulating the immune response, astragalus appears to support its balance and renewal, helping the body stay responsive without becoming overly reactive. This balance is essential for maintaining recovery, especially when small stressors begin to accumulate. Another layer to this is mitochondrial efficiency, the way your cells produce and use energy. When mitochondria function more effectively, the body experiences steadier energy rather than sharp peaks and drops. And this often translates into how you feel throughout the day, not just physically, but mentally as well. And this is why many people overlook it. The effects are gradual, not immediate. You're unlikely to feel a dramatic shift overnight because it works at a foundational level rather than masking surface symptoms. But over time, these deeper changes can influence how consistently the body performs. From a practical standpoint, it's straightforward. About 1 teaspoon of astragalus root powder can be added to coffee, blending into an existing routine without much effort. And like most foundational supports, consistency over weeks and months tends to matter more than anything else.
It's not about quick results. It's about building a more stable internal system. And the next edition takes a slightly more active role in how the body responds day to day.
Second, tart cherry concentrate stands out because of its high content of anthocyanins, natural compounds that support both vascular health and recovery processes. Instead of acting in one isolated area, it works across multiple systems, particularly those tied to circulation and repair. And this broader impact is what makes it especially relevant as the body becomes less responsive over time. One of its key advantages is supporting blood vessel flexibility. When circulation is efficient, oxygen and nutrients are delivered more effectively to tissues that need repair. This can subtly influence how the body feels after physical activity, making recovery feel smoother rather than delayed or incomplete. It also plays a role in reducing systemic inflammation, which, as mentioned earlier, is one of the biggest hidden barriers to proper recovery. When inflammation is better regulated, the body can shift its focus away from constant defense and toward actual repair. That shift alone can make a noticeable difference over time. But where tart cherry becomes even more interesting is its effect on sleep quality. It naturally supports the body's sleep cycles, helping improve both the depth and consistency of rest. And this is something many people underestimate. Because sleep is where most of the real work happens. During deep sleep, the body carries out much of its repair, hormonal balancing, and cellular regeneration. If sleep is disrupted or shallow, those processes become less efficient. But when sleep improves, everything built on top of it, energy, recovery, even metabolism, tends to improve as well. From a practical standpoint, it's simple to incorporate. About 1 tablespoon of unsweetened tart cherry concentrate can be added, ideally choosing a pure, high-quality source without added sugars. It blends easily and fits naturally into a daily routine. It's a small addition, but one that supports the timing and quality of recovery itself. And the final one brings everything together in a slightly more direct way. Number 1. Propolis is a unique natural compound produced by bees, often described as a protective substance for the hive. What sets it apart is its richness in bioactive elements that interact with multiple systems in the body at once. Rather than targeting a single pathway, it helps shape the overall environment in which cells operate, and that's what makes it especially powerful in this context. At its core, Propolis appears to support both the activation and protection of cellular systems. It doesn't just encourage processes to turn on, it also helps maintain a stable environment so those processes can continue effectively. This balance between stimulation and protection is critical, especially as the body becomes more sensitive to internal stressors over time.
It also plays a role in reducing inflammatory barriers that can quietly interfere with normal function. When low-grade inflammation is present, many biological signals become distorted or delayed. By helping to regulate this, propolis allows the body's natural communication systems to function more clearly and efficiently. There's also some indication that it can support metabolic activity, particularly in how the body utilizes stored energy. Again, it's not about forcing fat loss, but about improving the conditions that allow the body to use energy more effectively. And when multiple systems begin working in sync, the results tend to feel more natural and sustainable.
And this is why it ranks at the top. It works across several pathways at once: activation, protection, and efficiency. Instead of focusing on one isolated benefit, it supports the system as a whole. And when the system improves, individual outcomes often follow.
From a practical standpoint, it's easy to incorporate. Around 15 to 20 drops of a high-quality propolis tincture can be added to your coffee. If you're new to it, starting with a smaller amount allows you to gauge how your body responds before gradually increasing. It's a simple addition, but one that helps create the kind of internal environment where regeneration is more likely to happen.
When you look at this approach as a whole, the goal isn't to rely on one single ingredient. It's to support the body's responsiveness from multiple angles. Small, consistent inputs that improve signaling, reduce interference, and enhance recovery can gradually shift how the body feels and functions. Take a moment and consider this. What's one small adjustment you could start with today? It doesn't have to be everything at once. Sometimes the most meaningful changes begin with a single, consistent step. At this point, it's important to step back and see the bigger picture. This approach isn't about quick fixes or dramatic overnight changes. Each of these additions works by gently influencing underlying systems, and those systems take time to respond. The real shift happens gradually, often in ways that feel subtle at first, but become more noticeable with consistency. And that's where most people misunderstand the process. Consistency matters far more than intensity. It's not about adding everything at once or expecting immediate results. It's about creating a steady input that the body can recognize and adapt to over time. When signals are repeated consistently, the body begins to respond more efficiently, and that's where real change starts to build.
The deeper takeaway here is something many people underestimate. The body retains far more capacity than we often assume, even later in life. It doesn't lose its ability entirely, it simply becomes less responsive to the signals that once guided it. And when those signals are improved, even slightly, function can begin to follow. Small, consistent inputs, like the ones you've seen, can gradually shift how the body operates, not by forcing it, but by supporting it. Over time, this can influence energy, recovery, stability, and overall resilience in a way that feels natural rather than extreme.
And this leads to a useful perspective shift. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with my body?" which often leads to frustration, it may be more helpful to ask, "What signals is my body no longer receiving clearly?" Because when you start focusing on restoring communication rather than fixing problems, the entire approach changes.